So we're going to move on to our last piece of news, which involves GM, and I think, Alex, I'm going to let you take the lead on that.
Yeah, this was a post written by our newest blogger, Jonathan Ramsey, who I don't think we've formally addressed yet. So
the new guy, the noob.
He is the noob, and he's very good. And one of his first posts was this one where Bob Lutz talked to Jim Matea, is it Jim Matea or Matea, however you say his last name, from the Chicago Tribune, and pretty much told him that GM was putting rear-wheel drive vehicles on hold, except for stuff that's already too far along in the pipeline, like the Camaro. Because of the proposed CAFE regulation changes, and they also want to wait it out and see what happens now that the Supreme Court has ruled that the EPA can regulate CO2 standards, which they currently don't do. And
nor do I think they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, because
the EPA is under the umbrella of kind of the administration and staffed by. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know politics very well. You know better than I do, Alex. But I mean, as far as I knew, the EPA stayed away from this at kind of Bush's request. They didn't go after it. It was just ruled they had to do it. Now it's in their plate.
Well, it wasn't ruled that they had to do it. It was ruled that they could do it.
Okay, so we don't even know if they're going to.
The ruling that the way that Jonathan wrote it, it's the ruling that the EPA can regulate, and I don't think that they're compelled to regulate the CO2 standards. Now, in Europe, they are regulated, or is it just that they're taxed on them? Do either of you guys know?
I have no idea. We'd have to get an Autoblog Green guy on to talk about emission stuff. But the meat and potatoes of this is basically that all of the rear-wheel drive vehicles we were hoping for, the Impala. Let's say any version of the Camaro for Pontiac, or Pontiac's next rear-wheel drive coupe. Mm-hmm. What else? Rear-wheel drive vehicle Lucerne,
next-gen Lucerne, high horsepower versions of the Solstice and Sky.
Pontiac Grand Prix.
Yep. Well, that's the G8.
Oh, no, the G8.
That's the G8.
Well,
then
okay.
potentially
so the
Impala.
only one that has
anything that's scheduled to get a Zeta platform under it. By this article, based upon what Lutz said, is technically thrown into limbo. Which, listen, I don't know. How much of this is posturing, trying to?
I think it's all posturing.
Trying to just get some leverage.
Yeah, he's just priming people and setting himself up.
He's sending a message to Washington, saying this kind of stuff. Listen, these cars are. A lot of these cars, especially these rear-wheel drive ones, are what GM is supposedly basing the comeback on. Give me a break. Mm-hmm. I mean, what are you going to do? Not have the G8? Or are you going to have another front-drive Impala? Give me a break. Nobody wants to see this stuff anymore.
No, and they know it. They know their sales will remain flat rather than on the up curve that they're headed into.
And by the way,
and quite honestly, throw in cylinder deactivation and engine stop at idle. And you can make a lot of that up.
Yeah, of course you can. Listen, the cylinder deactivation thing works great. I've used it on the on one of the new trucks, and it's awesome, and it's seamless, and it really does show up. If you have your mileage thing on your computer, I mean, it makes a big difference.
I mean, you can. We're not talking about exotic technology to improve gas mileage, but we are talking about an investment that needs to be made. And I think, the environmentalists, activists, and even people in government who want to see these things made, I think if you pull away the layers of onion, that's what they're saying. There's just a lot of off-the-shelf technology right now that everybody could be using, and why don't we start using that? I think Lutz is kind of, like I said, just setting it up for multiple outcomes. If they can't make it happen, he gets to say, "I warned you," and I have a scapegoat. It's the government.
Right.
And if they do make it happen,
by the way, that scapegoat that won't work because enough people are going to say, "Listen, GM, how long have you been around? That the find that the not being able to do rear-wheel drive cars has killed you. That's kind of unacceptable. Also, there are other ways around, and it makes it just I have a problem with the whole thing. Listen, if this comes to fruition, first of all, one of the things, if this really does happen, and like I said, I personally don't believe it would happen, but if there's going to be no Pontiac G8, can we just take Pontiac behind the barn and put it out of its misery forever?
Seriously.
Because that is Pontiac. Pontiac without that car and the GTO and the Solstice is a joke, and it doesn't need to exist.
Mm-hmm. Totally. there's no way this can be true, I think.
This came off to me as more posturing more than anything else. They were just trying to make a point, and you know what? It's a valid point in many respects. But like you guys have already stated, and I'm not going to repeat what you've already said more than I need to, but this is what's going to bring GM out of the doldrums. And if they don't have this is the cornerstone of it. And I don't know, it was probably the saddest news I think we heard last week.
Well,
but the problem with Lutz, of course, is he always opens up his mouth, and I can never take the guy seriously, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
He knows he's a lightning rod too, and he knows, but that by opening his mouth, this will get all the attention it warrants. Hence,
exactly.
us talking
but
about
here's
it.
the flaw in his argument is that he equates rear-wheel drive with poor fuel economy and emissions, and that's not necessarily true.
That's not
Look at the
necessarily
Lexus
true.
LS hybrid. You know, that's 430 horsepower with a hybrid that gets decent gas mileage considering how much power it's putting out.
Yeah.
You know, they have their simple hybrid system, their alternator-based hybrid system that they're using in a few cars. That Saturn's pretty much going to have. Why they don't use that
in more cars? Honestly.
They could use it in every car. That's what I'm saying is they have the off-the-shelf technology, if they wanted, that they could disseminate it through every single car. It would be minimally invasive. People would hardly notice this stuff working. That would make a significant improvement in their corporate average fuel economy. That's something they could do. And this is like, so this argument is totally baseless, and it's silly to make people think that because you're going to produce a rear-wheel drive vehicle, that by definition it's going to be a 450 horsepower gas guzzling monster, and that's not the case. It doesn't have to be that way.
There is a certain amount of
No, go ahead, Damon.
There is a certain amount of drivetrain loss with power going out to the drive shaft and all that, and that isn't in a front-wheel drive car, but. And I'm not saying it's nominal, but it doesn't seem to be something that's going to be that big of an issue. And like you've already said, cylinder deactivation.
Well, it's worse with all-wheel drive, and look at how many all-wheel drive vehicles Ford's putting out, you know?
And also the other thing here, you know, the way that the discussion was framed, or at least the way Lutz presented it, it's like, oh, the rear-wheel drive Pontiac and all this stuff. Listen, those aren't all going to be V8 cars. I mean, they're going to put that 3.6-liter V6 in the big volume sellers of the Impala and of the G8 and of whatever else they come out with.
You make the V8 cars the niche high-performance vehicles, just like the CTS-V has been since it came out, and you make that V6, which is lauded. I mean, people...
It's a
V6 is a critical success.
Motor.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you pump that and everything, and you know, you put the fuel mileage tricks on that engine, and that's your volume seller. You know what? It's almost irritating. I'm extremely frustrated that GM would even make this move and kind of play with people's heads like this.
Also, I mean, here we are now. We just finished saying, you know, GM they're going to base a lot of the turnaround stuff on these cars. However, the mid-size cars from GM, meaning Aura and Malibu primarily, and G6 to a lesser extent. Listen, those are going to be the big bread and butter. I mean, the Malibu.
Well, the Malibu, that's going to be...
That is going to be the bread and butter for
That's going to be a
250,
300,000 unit car, which isn't something we've seen from a U.S. manufacturer, a solid one. You know, I mean, the current Impala does really well, considering, and you know, Chevy has a few models in the top 10 list, but that new Impala, I think GM's the only U.S. automaker who believes enough in its cars that it can say, I think we're going to sell over 250,000 of this single model, and they're going to do it with the Malibu.
Yeah, it's because they're going to offer it in hybrid, in the nice V6 model, and they're going to offer it with a 4-cylinder and a 6-speed. I mean, there's going to be all kinds of good things happening there. Mm-hmm. It's specifically in terms of the corporate average fuel economy, as it relates to the Malibu.
Yeah, they'll be fine. It was silly to get us all riled up like that.
Yeah.